Hello, and welcome to my Module 2 reflection for CI 533 Educational Psychology at Iowa State University. Now, before I begin talking with the two questions that have been proposed, I want to give you a brief glance at the students that I get the opportunity to interact with on a daily basis. Now, I teach at Fort Madison Senior High School, which is located in Fort Madison, Iowa, in the southeast corner of the state. Now, the southeastern corner is considered to be the economic backwaters of the state, so we have a lot of economic issues that exist here. Let's go ahead and let's get into looking at our student demographic data. 86% of our students are white, 6% are Hispanic in origin, and 6% are black. 50% of our students are considered to be low SES, 50% have some sort of free and reduced lunch, and 27% of our students are transient, meaning they come and go throughout the year. With that in mind, let's talk about the first question of how am I using theories of self to understand what shapes and motivates students in my class. Now, the theory of self that I tend to subscribe to first is Bandura, and what we're looking at here is really how individuals create self-confidence. What are the origins and how does it influence behavior? Now, one of the things I want to draw your attention to is looking at this diagram right here. So we can see that there are cognitive factors, behavioral factors, and environmental factors that all interact with one another on a daily basis, that formulate how students interact and view themselves, and how does this influence how they act in my classroom. Now, this concept of constant interaction between these three things is referred to as reciprocal determinism. Ultimately, this constant interaction is going to lead to an individual's self-efficacy, which is a very, very powerful influence on how an individual behaves. For example, what I like to do to kind of think of self-efficacy is the little engine that could. If you think you can, then you probably will, or at least you'll have the skill sets to attack barriers and modify your approach to be successful. If you think you can't, it's probably not going to happen. So the impact of high self-efficacy in the classroom, as Bruning, Shaw, and Norby indicated on page 110, is that you see an increase in student task engagement. You see an increase in persistence, more strategies that are used to overcome these barriers or obstacles that they encounter, greater perseverance, and an overall improved performance of the student as well. So what I try to do is I like to develop rapport with kids. I mean, if I don't have a relationship, it's going to be very hard to kind of guide them to see themselves in a different light. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll model what a student looks like. So I like to use expert modeling, and I use that term loosely because I'm still learning my craft. And I'm very open with kids about what I don't understand or the questions that I have so that they can see my thought process through the entire class, or that specific thought, if you will. I also use a novice perspective when I teach, so I want to teach on their level and not on my level. Everything that I do is criterion based, or at least I'm moving in that regard, and for me that's going to be aligned with the Iowa Core social studies standards. I also like to employ aspects of cognitive modeling, where Bruning really outlines 4 important aspects that need to be included in your day-to-day instruction, and these include creating a rationale or a purpose. A lot of times students go, why do we need to learn this? And I get it, and if I don't have an answer, then I question, well, why do you? Model the procedure, so if I introduce some kind of analysis or activity, I give them some kind of example that they can cling to or deviate from if they need be, and so on and so forth. And eventually we're getting to the point where students can be gradually released and at their own pace and their own time and have the opportunity to kind of perform on this task. Now, also, another theory that is brought in here is the attribution theory, where people are really striving to try to figure out how does this affect my life. And I teach in a discipline where I have that option, and I can really outline what the historical aspects were, how they affect current trends, and how those current trends affect the kid. So the point that I make in my social studies class is, hey, yeah, this may have happened, centuries ago, but guess what? It really does affect you, and here's why. And that's going to hook kids into understanding, okay, how? And am I going to buy into that or am I not? And I have a lot of success with that. And plus, it keeps me on my toes and constantly learning as well. In addition, when I start class, I love bringing in student perspectives. I want to activate and build from their prior knowledge. Bruning makes a statement on page 119 that different students make different kinds of attributions. So we have kids that have different backgrounds and experiences. And so one of the things that is my job as a teacher and in my class is I need to make sure that we're all progressing in some regard. Because as Peterson and Schreiber found in 2006, that students that have negative attributional styles have a tendency to have low grades. They reduce their amount of the ability to advocate for themselves, and they have poor strategies. Now, some of this is responsible to peer pressure and judgment by being perceived as being unintelligent by their peers. So I need to combat that in ways. Now, one of the other theories that I subscribe to is self-determinism theory, or self-determination theory. I'm a firm believer that autonomy and control lead to success, but not every student has the ability to have that autonomous background and the know-how or the conditional knowledge to use the right aspects to have success. Another quote that I have from Bruning here is, to be autonomous, a behavior must be chosen without pressure and be self-determined. So a lot of the times in my class there's a broad opportunity to kind of select whatever you want in terms of assessment or a specific area you want to go. So with that freedom of choice, kids can kind of follow their own passions to a degree. Now, the take-home aspects of theories of self-motivation are these questions, and these are the questions that I constantly revisit, to make sure that it's appropriate and is it facilitating an environment that is conducive to increasing students' perception of themselves or increase their self-efficacy, which will lead to greater intrinsic motivation, as we'll talk about later in this presentation. So feel free to stop this, pause this, but these are the questions that I look at. Now, the second question leads us to look at how can I use theories of creativity and problem solving to make my instruction more problem focused or authentic. Now, one of the things that I really like to do, and this is a big deal for me, is I have to activate prior knowledge. History is both thematic and linear, and if I don't have that baseline, I can't build from there. So once I have kind of a baseline of what they know, I introduce concepts and attach it to pre-existing schemata. And the other thing that I strive to is really to foster or facilitate active learning in my class. If I'm the only one talking or lecturing, I'm probably not being very effective, and students probably aren't learning as deep as I want them to. Another very important aspect for me is to create an environment of curiosity. Dewey noted that the curious mind is constantly alert and exploring. And as we have previously observed, attention leads to retention. And if we don't have their hook, where are we going to go from there? None of that information is going to be effectively encoded. Now, environments of curiosity promote active learning. So a lot of times we need to question the prior knowledge that we have built, and does it stand up to scrutiny? If it does, awesome, let's continue this. If it doesn't, let's reformulate what doesn't work. And so as we learn, let's attach new deductions or information to our pre-existing schemata and really scrutinize the product so that we can see a growth from the child to the adult and so on and so forth. Now, the role of creativity is very important. Creative thought is going to stretch the status quo. It's going to push social and human limits into the future. It's really going to drive innovation as well. It's that vision, that long-term vision that we have. So it's important to facilitate this, especially from a student perspective. Now, some other X that I use is divergent thinking, kind of thinking outside the box in novel ways. Reflective judgment, reviewing multiple aspects of the same problem. And I love functional fixedness, where we can take a concept and use it in a totally different way. The picture that you see here on the right That's kind of what I think of when I merge these two together. A new, novel way that people don't expect that still, solves a problem. I also like to trumpet incremental theory, which notes that intelligence is changeable and improves incrementally with short-term goals. And these short-term goals are ultimately going to boost confidence. As I have previously stated, I like to teach from a novice perspective in order to combat the expert blind spot effect, where I'm a learner as well. I'm not just an expert. Some quotes that I want to cite here, and these have great implications for how I run my class and what this means um, or for next year, and so on and so forth. Curiosity becomes intellectual when it is transformed into interest in problems provoked by the observation of things and the accumulation of material. So, if I grab their attention, if they're curious, we can cultivate that so students pursue that more. And if these germinating powers are not used at the right moment, well, they're done. So we have to make sure that the fluidity of the curiosity or the environment that is created needs to be fostered and cultivated for the student to continue. And lastly, with respect to curiosity, the teacher has usually more to learn than the teach. And I've learned this in the last few years, that I need to model this, especially when I empower kids. They're going to have questions that lead in 10 or 20 or 30 different directions. And, if I don't learn, then I can't answer their questions and help guide their own learning. I know I'm getting over on time here, but just stay with me if you wouldn't mind. This is kind of an example of the environment of curiosity that I present to kids. Is I take American history, it's divided thematically. So this is U.S. expansion. You can see it's divided into 4 major eras and kind of where it goes. And these are big time things that happen in those eras that really influence expansion. And the overall question that I tie to facilitate the environment of curiosity is, when are we justified to rebel against authority? Because a lot of times in each one of these we see this, and students, and you and I alike, have also done this as well. So when is it justifiable? Alright, and the take home for the second question is, for me, and these are things that again that I consider, is how is prior knowledge brought in? And really looking at this is, am I teaching to the student's ability? Am I fostering or facilitating their creative side? Because if they don't see the importance of history and how it affects them, then none of that is going to go any further than that. So the biggest thing is, are new products or thoughts being produced? Are students being challenged at all levels with my instruction? If it is, fantastic. If I'm not, then I've got some serious work to do. Thanks for tuning in.